concerns. Number one, Rita's son Bubba, did he get out of the hospital?
He did get out yesterday, but he come home with a bandage arm here and an IV port here.
So do they know what caused that, or?
He had a burn when he went to Mexico for a mission trip,
Oh, yeah.
and evidently something, a staph of some kind, but they said it wasn't that MRSA, but that, you know what I'm saying? But it's as sickening, I mean, it's making him really sick. But they are giving him some high-powered IV antibiotics, and he has 2 weeks that he has to take them at home, the IV ones. His wife, the RN, thank goodness.
Y'all put that on your prayer list. Also, David Yancey called me this morning, and he gave me permission to tell you on this. A couple of weeks ago, hey, Darlene.
Hi.
Mike, come on in.
Hi, y'all.
David woke up a week or two ago with a bump somewhere in his neck, his jaw, and he got to where he was not having trouble swallowing, but it hurt him a little bit. Pain was there, and so he went to. Lee told him he'd go to the doctor, and he's like a lot of guys. I'll be all right, you know. So he finally went, and they did some blood work, so he got an appointment Friday morning with a specialist or some sort of throat guy thing. And so.
He had the blood clot?
No.
What did you say? I missed that.
It just some, he had a knot, a bump is what he called it, and just creating a little pain for him as time went on. And so, I don't know if it was a biopsy Friday morning or what, he didn't know, he didn't know. But, so we need to put David over here, please. What you need?
We need some down here too, please.
Okay.
David again.
Hey, Mike,
Hey, what? Just take a minute.
Tom Terry stopped me on the way to church. There's one of those animal alerts, I think, or something out.
What?
On County Road 3701. There's some lady that's running around with hair curlers in her hair out there. He showed me a picture of her. And we need to be on what she drives, a silver Cadillac.
Well, if there's been anybody else but Tommy Terry, I might have believed it.
And tomorrow's his Barbara's birthday.
Is that right?
Yeah. Well, let's pray, y'all. Father, thank you for today, and thank you for the gift of laughter and joking around, and we just know that you love cheerful hearts, and so we thank you for the heart that you've given us. Lord, we lift up Bubba to you, Lord, just praying for him, praying for this infection. Lord, he doing your work down in Mexico and caught this problem, and so, Lord, we know that you're going to take care of him. We just pray that he'll do what he needs to do, and just give him your peace, and be with his wife and his mom, and just give them your peace, Lord. Pray for David, Lord. Lee, she's worried. That's just a natural thing that we worry when something medical arises in our lives, and that's pretty common as we get a little older. So we just pray for David, pray for those doctors, and pray that they'll use all their knowledge they have, Lord, to just figure out what this deal is, and we just ask your will to be done there, Lord. David is acquiesced to doing what he needs to do, and he didn't at first, but he understands the importance of looking at that. And Lord, there's other people that are dealing with cancers and life issues, and so we just pray for them, Lord. Pray your supernatural powers in their lives, Lord, whether it's your peace, your will, your love, your healing, whatever that is, Lord. We just pray that you'll just touch them in some way. Maybe it's just through us, through some other person, Lord, that just gives them a word of encouragement, speaks a little life into them, Lord, the life of Jesus. Thank you for that, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So, Monday night, some of us went down to First Baptist Church to a church security deal. Wasn't a conference, but it was about an hour and a half long. And Sunday after church, once we close the service, we're gonna turn the video off and we're gonna talk about church security for a few minutes. We haven't done that in a long time, but we've got a lot of new people. It's important that our church knows what we're doing as far as security is concerned. And so, just a little word. The Roe versus Wade thing is a topic of serious conversation. Supreme Court is going to rule on that sometime this month, and they've already heard of protests at churches. They talked about that in Homeland Security and DOJ and Department of Justice. They know that there's going to be some unrest, and hopefully they're peaceful protests. But just something that we as believers need to know, they're certainly going to come after us, Christian believers. I'm not saying they're going to come after us here, but we just want the church to know that we're as prepared as we need to be. First thing we did right after we built this building, when we built that building, we changed those front doors to the spot. But once we start services, the doors are locked. Nobody can get in. We have guys at the front door. Just like that shooting that occurred yesterday. So many problems with what happened there. The school never went on lockdown, and anyway, but so we do that. We've had an FBI guy come to these things before, and almost all of those church shootings should have been stopped in the parking lot. They never should have gotten the building, and so that's the reason we have guys at the door watching. So anyway, we just want to make you aware of that. It's important. It's sad that we're at that spot in our history, but we are. So let's open our Bibles to Matthew 25, and we're going to start at verse 14. Just going to look at I think 5 verses tonight, 14 through 18, and again we're talking about the whole idea behind the parable of the 10 virgins and this parable of the talents. The whole idea behind both of those is to be prepared, to be alert. And so we're going to see that theme as we go through this tonight. As we are here on the earth and we're waiting for the Lord to return, we can't be standing around just looking at the clouds, looking at the heavens, looking up. We need to be busy about God's business, and that's what we saw with the 5 virgins, 5 foolish virgins, and that's what we'll see with one of these guys tonight in the talents parable. We have to continue to be faithful. We have to continue to serve, and wherever the Lord calls you, that's where we need to be. Just like Bubba going to Mexico. I've got friends that go to Belize on a regular basis. People that still go around the world and minister to folks around the world. I went to Africa in 95 or 96, I remember, and I got to walk every morning. We had a group of guys building a church, and we had a group of doctors at this clinic, and then me and 3 other guys every morning would meet at that church, and we'd each have a Kenyan pastor, and we'd go out through the bush. And just walking through the bush, and the bush is just like a desert. I'm not talking about forest or anything. And we just go from hut to hut and sharing the gospel. And so that we need to be. But I did that. I felt called to go do that. But our mission, it can be right here in Mixon, Texas, right here in Noonday and Bullard. There's a lot of mission work that needs to be done here. So we just need to be faithful and not be caught unprepared. 1 John 2:28 says, "So now little children remain," or some translations say abide in him, so that when he appears we may have the boldness and not be ashamed before him at his coming. So we just need to be ready every day. I hope that everybody is opening up their Bible every day and reading something, praying about it, reading it, and just staying ready. The Apostle Paul talked about it, 1 Timothy 6:12. That's kind of his final thesis, I guess is the way to say that. He said we must fight the good fight every day. That fight of confusion, that fight of chaos, and we know who the author of that is. And so, as we saw in the parable of the 10 virgins, we saw that the bridegroom was delayed. Jesus was delayed. He's been delayed for over 2,000 years now. People expecting him to come, and the story is still the same. We still need to be prepared. And so, just ready for death, ready for the return of Christ, whatever. We don't know when we're going to leave this earth. Hebrews 9:27 says, I used this scripture the other day at the funeral, said, and just as it is appointed for people to die once, and after this the judgment. So it's appointed unto man once to die, and then the judgment. So what is our judgment going to be? That's the choice that people have. So let's look at the parable of the talents, and let's just look at these first few verses here. And this is Jesus talking. He said, for it is just like a man going on a journey. He called his own slaves, could be servants in some translations. He called his own slaves and turned over his possessions to them. In other words, he turned over whatever he had, his possessions being his ranch, his stock, whatever he had. He turned his possessions over to these slaves. He said, to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his own ability. And then he went on a journey, and immediately the man who had received 5 talents went, put them to work, and earned 5 more. So you see right there that he doubled what he was given. And verse 17 says, in the same way, the man who with 2 earned 2 more. But the man who had received 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. And so he didn't provide any kind of increase with his master's money. So again, it's a warning. It's a warning to take advantage of the opportunities that God puts in our place, puts in our path, just to be available to meet a need. Isaiah 55:6 says, "Seek the Lord while He may be found; call to Him while He is near." And then Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians 6:2, he said, "Look, now is the acceptable time. Now is the day of salvation." Today is the day of salvation for who? We're saved. But God may put somebody in your path, and we must be prepared to share the story of Christ with them. And today may be their salvation. Many times Jesus called on men to make the most of their spiritual opportunities. In John 12, turn over real quick. John 12, 35 and 36, he says, "The light will be with you only a little longer." That's a warning. Walk while you have the light, so that darkness doesn't overtake you. The one who walks in darkness doesn't know where he's going. Now, I find that puzzling, because he may not admit it, but there's a lot of people who understand enough about the Bible to know that if they reject Christ or rebel against Christ, they know where they're headed. Whether they believe it or not, I don't know. They may be agnostic. You know, if they're agnostic, they don't even believe that you can know that there's a God. So,
what's our first blank right here? Scripture's filled with what?
warnings. I'm sorry. I didn't call that out. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Scripture filled with warnings that we must take advantage of those opportunities. And so, this guy, it says, "The one who walks in darkness doesn't know where he's going." Verse 36 says, "While you have the light, believe in the light, so that you may become sons of the light." Jesus said that, and then he went away and hid from him. He hid from him. Maybe he went and rested. I don't know. So the tragedy of wasted, next blank, opportunity. The tragedy of wasted opportunity that's the theme of the parable of talents. Because you got 2 guys who got talents, and they didn't have the same amount of talents, but they had the equal increase in talent. They doubled what they had. The one guy, he didn't. And so it's kind of like the parable of the 10 virgins, focused on waiting, being ready by waiting, by having patience. Waiting is the next blank there. And so those 5 virgins who had oil for their lamps, they represent the believers who exhibit a life of who possess saving grace. Represent believers who possess saving grace. They have proclaimed and they have possessed saving grace. So the parable of the talents focus on being ready by working, next blank, working or serving. I don't particularly like that word working, but that's what this translation says. We're servants. So those two faithful servants, they invested those talents. They represent believers who exhibit a life of service. God's given us all different gifts, all different talents, and that's what we invest in the community, in the kingdom. So when we read these two parables side by side here in 25, they just give us a picture. It's an illustration of looking forward to the second coming with anticipation. Next play. Anticipation. People have been for 2,000 plus years living in anticipation for the second coming of Christ. And so, but they continue to live their lives as they're prepared. They're prepared for His coming by their faithful service. We just don't let anything get in our way. We know that's what we're called to do, and so we just continue to serve in a lot of different ways. We can't sit back and live an idle life. If you read Psalm 45 this morning, when I wrote that, I talked about that. I compared it to, I was sitting there praying about how to give that picture, and I thought of the gears in our vehicle. We have park, and we have reverse, and we have neutral, and we have drive, forward, whatever you might say. And so a lot of people who profess Christ, they just park. They don't do anything. And a lot of them are backing up. When you ask them to come help with something, they just do that crawdad thing, go back. And then a lot of them are just idle. Sometimes I wonder why they come to church. I'm glad they do, because the Holy Spirit, if they're here and they're hearing, then the Holy Spirit can convict them to get up and go. And then we have go, we have forward, whatever that means. But a lot of people are just idle, So they're neutral. That's how I couch that devotion this morning. But we just can't sit back and live that idle life. So saving faith is serving faith. Saving, we are called, we're saved to serve. And that's a hard, when people first get saved, that's a hard thing sometimes for them to understand, that we are saved to serve. And so we just need to encourage them. But the danger here is just not to get caught up in serving that we forget to think about. There's a lot of people who are so caught up in serving. For example, I remember years and years ago, Paul and I were in traditional church, and we were, our music minister's dad died. And so our men's group, we cooked for them in the church kitchen, and then we would serve them. And this one older lady, I was in there cutting up ham, she said, I didn't know we were going to have to feed the whole church. And I was like, really? Who cares? We're just here feeding people. That's what Jesus did. He just fed them. But I mean, you hear those kind of comments, and sometimes you just go, hey, wake up! What are you here for? You're here to complain, or you're here to serve? But we just sometimes people forget to think about Him returning, and they have no joy in that, no rejoicing in that. So it's like that. The believers at the church in Thessalonica, they fell into that undisciplined, careless way of living, and they decided just not to work at all. So they became busybodies. There are busybodies that have professed Christ. Some of them are saved, some of them are not. But they are busybodies who did nothing, next line, nothing productive, and even disrupted the church. I've seen that happen. They just, I don't know how to explain it really, but I've seen. I knew one guy who I knew he was saved, but he was so far one direction. At times you try to just rein him in and get mad. Well, that's not the right spirit. You try to go to him in grace and try to explain. But that happens at times. So Paul commanded them to work in quiet fashion and eat their own bread, eat what they've been taught. And so he scolded the church not to grow weary of doing good. 2 Thessalonians 3, put my glasses on, 3 verses 10 to 13 says, in fact, when we were with you, this is what we commanded you. If anyone isn't willing to work, he should not eat. For we hear that there are some among you who walk irresponsibly, not working at all, but interfering with the work of others. Now we command and exhort such people by the Lord Jesus Christ, that quietly working, they may eat their own food. Brothers, do not grow weary from doing good. So we're just to be faithful and continue to serve. Wherever the Lord leads us or wherever we are, we can serve. So the parable of the talents, it has relevance to every generation. From the time of Jesus through the disciples and on down to us today. Has relevance to every generation. So Jesus is still talking about this generation who's going to be alive, the generation that will not pass away. They're going to be living during when Jesus comes in the tribulation, just before he returns. So this particular parable has of the talents illustrates four very basic aspects of spiritual opportunity. Our responsibility, our reaction, the reckoning we will face, and then the reward that we gain. So let's look at our responsibility, verses 14 and 15 there in Matthew. So let me go back and read those once more. It says, for it is just like a man going on a journey. He called his own slaves and turned over his possessions to him. And again to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his own ability. Then he went on a journey. Immediately. Stop there. Immediately. So he's talking about an outward expression. We saw that in the parable of 10 virgins. It's how they present themselves outwardly. So we see these 2 guys that had been given some possessions of the man who went on a journey, and they immediately invest what they have for this gentleman. However they did that, maybe they were entrepreneurs, maybe they started a business, or maybe they traded and retraded stuff. I don't know, but they invested for the man. This other guy, he just went and dug a hole. He didn't do anything. So it's the outward expression, just like the 5 virgins who were prepared for the wedding feast, and the 5 foolish virgins who didn't have enough oil for the lamps and got locked out. And so these are the type of people, the ones who are unprepared, these foolish virgins, and this one faithless slave. They don't represent people who are believers. They represent these professed pagans, atheists, agnostics, reprobates, just sorry. And so when you get down to the bottom there, they represent those who profess Christ. We talked about this. They profess Christ, but they don't possess saving faith. They may say it, but we see in their outward life that you just kind of go, Yeah, there's no evidence of serving. There's no evidence of grace. There's evidence of just a lot of different chaos or confusion in their life, but no evidence of Christ in them. And so the man, he is going on this journey, and so that tells us that he's probably going to be gone for a while. He was planning to be gone for a long time, maybe months, even a year or more. It doesn't say, but that's the general consensus among the commentators. So in order for his property, any of us that go on a trip, an extended trip, if we have, let's say, people that own horses and cattle very seldom take trips because they have to feed. And so if you happen to go away, you want to know that somebody is going to be taking care of your possessions, taking care of your property. Like Timmy and Catherine, they're getting ready to be gone for 2 or 3 years. 16,000 miles, however long it takes them. So I'm sure that they have taken steps to had their property looked after. And so that's what this guy's doing. so in order for that to, his property to be well managed and cared for in his absence, he called his own slaves and turned over his possessions to them. Sometimes we have friends, sometimes we have our kids, or maybe our parents, or whoever. But we want to make sure that our property is taken care of. So the fact that these were his own slaves reinforces the idea that Jesus was giving us a picture. He was illustrating to us that those outward expressions are of the church. That's what that expression is about. The church. That's that blank. It's composed of those who say or allege that they belong to Christ. And so, many times through Scripture, we see where people in the Gospels are referred to as Christ's disciples, even though some of them are false. We know that. And most of the time, it's pretty easy to recognize that type of individual. So, as I read through this, I thought, well, a wealthy person would often have special slaves, and their function was to be overseers for their property, over their house. They were managers of the property, and in a lot of cases, the slaves or the servants of these people that go on these journeys may have been more educated than the people who actually had the money, had the property, the possessions, which I thought was pretty interesting. So it just tells me that any old redneck can go out there and make a lot of money. He doesn't know squat about taking care of anything, but he can hire that to be done. There's things that when it comes to computers, there are things that I can do and things that I have no idea what to do, but I know where to go to get people that can show me how to do what I need to do. One of them sitting right back there. There's Eric. So those are just people who are willing to do that. So, here's an interesting point. When he left town for any length of time, these slaves acted with almost the full authority, and today we call that a power of attorney. So sometimes people give other people a power of attorney to take care of their possessions, to make decisions for them, to sell property, or handle their bank accounts, or whatever. I've done that many times for people. I've read many of those things through the years, especially as people get older, they get ill, and they really just can't think clearly. They'll give power of attorney to someone, and that's not always a relative. It's someone they trust. Most of the time, it's for a relative, but they are responsible for handling all the assets of the individual, the owner, whoever that might be, managing that for their benefit and profit. So the guy in this parable that had 3 trusted slaves, he thought he could. He trusted some of his possessions when he went away. And so as the parable goes, he left the one with 5 talents, another 2, another 1, and each according to his ability. So it tells me that those 2 guys that doubled what they got, the 5 and the 2, those guys had some sense. They had some logic, they had some entrepreneurial mentality. I don't know, but they had some education somewhere. The other guy, I don't know if he was just as scared that he was going to lose that 1 talent or what, but he just went and hid it. And so apparently he didn't have much ability. But the owner, he was satisfied. His money was in capable hands because he said they were all 3 trusted. And so he left and he went on his journey. So the number of talents, I mentioned this earlier, but when the number of talents given to each servant or each slave has no significance at all. It just illustrates a wide range of responsibilities that have from high and demanding to relatively low and easy. So what is significant is that the responsibilities were given to each according to his ability. Here's an example of that. When we were at Crossbrand, Mike Morrow, years and years ago, we were going to build a youth building, and Mike Morrow put me in charge of that, a lay pastor, to look after that. And I said, man, you've lost your senses, because I don't know how to drive a nail, and don't want to. That's not my deal. I don't have any gifts for that or any mental capacity for that. Yeah, but you're good at just kind of keeping people focused and moving forward. Well, 6 months goes by, and I've been telling you, man, we need to do something different, because you had too many chiefs. All these guys said, why don't you do it this way? And I go, why don't you do it this way? What do you need about it? What do you need about it? So he put Rocky McMillan in charge of that. I told him, I said, Jesse, you put Rocky in charge of that. We'll get a building. Boom, got a building. So I didn't have the ability. I may have had the ability to encourage people and move them forward, but I didn't have the ability to talk intelligently to these guys who were builders and that craftsmen. I didn't, and so, but Rocky understood their lingo. So that's just it's each according to his ability. There are things we'll ask people to do sometimes, and they say, I don't know. Well, just try it. Oh, but we tried that, it didn't work. So it's okay. So the owner he knew those slaves intimately, and he trusted each one only with the responsibility he could reasonably be expected to handle. So he trusted those guys. I thought that was interesting. He trusted those guys, but that one guy that only got one talent, I don't think he had much faith in that guy. Didn't think he could handle very much. Maybe the thought was, well, he couldn't handle 5, but he surely can handle 1. I don't know. So the talent could be gold or silver or copper, and it was first a measure. This is interesting. The measure according to the weight of the gold or the silver or the copper. And so the weight was anywhere from 58 to 60 pounds. It was a unit of coinage with a value of 6,000 denarii. Okay? And a denarii was a day's wage for a common laborer. So the example here is 80 pounds of silver. Does that say solver?
Yeah.
Hey, I go over these things and it's getting in a hurry. So 80 pounds of silver at $115 an ounce would make a talent worth $19,000. So think about that. In today's market, if a talent was worth 6,000 denarii, it would take a day labor 20 years to make that much money, somewhere in the neighborhood of $300,000. 20 years. Today's money. So again, Jesus is not using the word talents to illustrate the value, the value of a specific coin. The point is, he is emphasizing the common accountability for differing levels of responsibility based on the individual's ability. We have to recognize some people only have certain abilities. I only have certain abilities. And so we don't want to overload them with something that they're certainly not capable of doing. And may not find out until a lot of people come up here in the past. Daryl Johnson, I've probably given you all this example before. Years and years ago, when we started our men's Bible study at Cross Brand, one night at the Bible study, Daryl came up to me and said, man, I want to serve, but I don't know where to serve. And I said, what do you like to do? He said, well, I kind of like singing. I laughed. He said, well, I'm serious. I was, oh, are you kidding me? He goes, yeah. Well, my God, Daryl can sing. He played the drums. He's come here and played the drums. Daryl's got some talent. I didn't know that. But I learned not to make fun of people when they tell me stuff like that. And Daryl didn't take offense, thank goodness. Daryl's always got a couple of guns and several knives. He's a good friend. And so Daryl is still teaching Bible study over there at Cross Street. So I left at 15, really left in 10 when I started interim. So we started the first Bible study for men about 2006, I think. So Daryl came about 2007. He's been teaching that Bible study ever since. Long time. Faithful. That's the whole idea. So individual ability. So the issue here in this parable, it pertains to what each servant or each slave does with the fairly assessed responsibility he's been given. So it just means that we just need to recognize that some people can do some things better than other people. I'm a good gopher. That's what I do. I'm a good gopher. You ask Paula, I'm her gopher. Tonight I came home and she's like, I can't get this done. She, can you help me? I said, well, what to do? I just tell me what to do. I'll do what I can. So we just need to understand that we assess what they can or can't do. The most noble motives are so important. That's the next one. The most noble motive in the heart of a faithful servant will be to accomplish as much as possible for the sake of his master during his absence. And that's not just for, a situation like this where this guy goes on a journey and these guys are left to take care of the possessions of that guy. The motive of any faithful servant is to do what you're called to do, what you're asked to do. If you can't do it, just get some help. That's the reason we work together as teams to try to accomplish. Our motives are so important. And like you heard me say, not everybody who walks through those doors up there has the same motive that we have. And so we need to be aware of that as well. And for example, these terrible, tragic things that are happening in these schools and churches, the motive is so important. The motive of the heart of a servant. So it's significant that although those servants or slaves with the 5 and 2 talents did not produce equal profits, they did produce an equal percentage of the profit because they doubled what they had been given. They doubled what they'd been given. So they were probably had some entrepreneurial spirit. I don't know. So it's the same with Christians. Different capabilities, opportunities come a different way. They may produce differing results, but working with the same faithfulness, the same devotion to Christ. We understand what our calling is, and that is just to be a servant, to be a slave to Christ. It's hard for me to say that word slave. It just has a bad connotation, but we that's who we are, is to Christ. We're his slaves. But faithfulness and devotion to him. I talked about that this morning, about, when you're looking at this Psalm 45, you can tell that the writer, in the very first verse of that psalm, he is so overwhelmed with adoration for God that he goes into that, talking about God and all he's accomplished. And, it's an address to the bridegroom, what he's doing. And so it's adoration. We adore Christ. We adore what he has done for us. And we should always remember that. So the results will be differing at times, but it all should be done with that same faithfulness and devotion. So in 1 Corinthians 3:8, Jesus assures, that word, I've been going through the New Testament and writing down every verse where he says that. There's a bunch of them. I haven't finished it yet. But he assures his servants that, and each will receive his own reward according to his own labor. His own labor. So just get out there and get busy. It doesn't matter. Just like that friend of mine that during when we get ready for the rodeo, he was from Jacksonville, and he asked what was going on down there. He'd been to the rodeo many times, and he said, "What all y'all accomplished down there?" And I told him, and I said, "There's one thing about I'd really like to see that announcer's booth be painted." And he said, "I'll paint it. I'll go down and paint it tonight." That's how he responded to that. And he went and did it.
And it looked good.
It did. It looked good. The good thing about it was, when he got down there, he didn't have to use his ladders. He stood inside and just leaned down and spray painted it. It took him about an hour. So,
I'm glad it didn't fall out.
well, that'd been bad. That'd been bad. So let's look at our reaction. What is the reaction in verses 16, 17, and 18? So here's what the word says. In verse 16 it says, I said immediately, that's important. He said, the man who had received 5 talents went, he put them to work, and he earned 5 more. In the same way, the man with the 2 earned 2 more. But, we'll get to but here in a minute. So, what that tells me, it says immediately, it says, those 2 guys were eager. Man, they wanted to increase what they had been given by their master. They wanted their master to see that they took that responsibility seriously, and that they increased what he gave them. He increased their position. Immediately, he didn't waste any time. He just went and did it. Just like that friend of mine. He just went and painted that box. So it represents the genuine, that's the next one, the genuine believer whose greatest desire is to serve God. Greatest desire to serve God. He is fulfilling what Jesus declared to be the first and the greatest commandment, to love your God with all your heart, all your soul, with all your might. Love your God. So he was a good servant, and he felt the responsibility to go to work. Wow. And I wrote that, it's like, where did that go? I mean, in today's society, people just don't work. I hear time and time again, people on ranches, people in businesses can't get any help. We're trying to enlist some drilling rigs, and the rigs are available, but we don't have anybody working on them. It's not just, it's not one place, it's all over. So, there's several translations, they use the word put them to work. It kind of has this broad meaning. It's talking about doing business over a period of time. Servant didn't just simply make one good investment and then sit back. He worked, he traded, he retraded. As long as his master was away, he was busy. Next blank, he was busy taking care of his master's business. He was constantly trying to do better. He took advantage of whatever resources he had. I don't know whatever he had available to him, but he took advantage of that. He doubled the amount that his master had given him. So, even though he was given half as much to work with, the other guy, the one that only got 2 talents, he took advantage just like the first guy. He took advantage, he doubled his master's money, but both of those men, they demonstrated the supreme commitment. I tell these couples in the vows that when I marry them, that you don't get married to obey the laws of the state of Texas. You don't get married. You don't stay married because you love. You stay married because you make the commitment. Y'all remember that? Yeah. You make the commitment, there's a lot of people just don't want to make commitments today. But we're not making it. We're making it to Christ. We're giving him our commitment to him. It's the vow or him to him. Till death do us part. And so that's the same whether we're, in our personal life till we die. I remember my granddad one day, he said, I told you the story about he was mad at those young guys been there and working in the church. He was about 19. He said that, and he said, those guys that are 70, they don't do anything. And I thought, okay, that's perspective. But he said, I'm to serve until I die. And I told some of y'all this too. The day before he died, he was in Richardson in a retirement home. And every Sunday he expected Paul and I to drive over there after church so I could read him his Bible study. And so I'm sitting there, and I was this close to him. I mean, I was right here. And he didn't have his hearing aids in. I was talking to him, and he looked up and he goes. So I put my ear right in his mouth, and he says, "When's Jesus come get me? I'm real tired." He was 96. I mean, it's one of the greatest stories that ever happened to me. He was 96 and he passed away the next day. But he was busy. And man, he'd make the rounds in that retirement center just talking to people. And he was committed. And so that's it took a long time, but that's what the Lord gave me was his life as an example to me. So let's talk about the third guy. The third guy was completely different from these first 2 guys. It says, but the man who had received 1 talent went off. He dug a hole and he hid his master's money. Do y'all know anybody that's ever dug a hole in the backyard and buried money? Some of us older.
My grandpa,
My mom did it.
Yeah.
he went through the Depression.
What is that, King Albert tobacco can?
Prince Albert.
Prince Albert, yeah. Prince Albert, that's right, Prince
The
Albert.
old glass mason jar.
Mason jars.
Yeah, mason jar. Listen, I was working with Paul's brother down in South Louisiana years ago, back in like 78 or 79. We were down south between Baton Rouge and Hammond. We were south of the interstate down in the swampy area. And we ran into this blind man. And he had bags of silver. And Paul's brother was trying to jip him out of those bags of silver. The old man was very crafty, very new. So Johnny bought 2 bags of silver. And we immediately left and went to Lafayette where he lived, went to the backyard, dug a hole. He put those bags of silver in a garbage bag and buried them in the backyard. And we sold that house. To this day, I couldn't tell you if He took those, he removed those bags, probably did, but I don't know, yeah.
I was gonna say, my great aunt out in Midland, years ago, they had bought an old house and moved it. When they got ready to start doing some remodeling, they went through and reframed the windows. They found a stack of silver certificates inside of one window frame, and then in another one, they found several sacks of silver dollars. It had been put in a house, and apparently the people that had it passed away, and the house was sold, and they found it, years later when they were doing the remodel.
This good friend of mine, we were just got out of college, his grandmother died, and he couldn't get a hold of my buddy. His dad couldn't get a hold of his buddy, so he called me, he said, hey, I spoke to my mama's house, and just don't let anybody in. Yeah, I'll do that. So I go there and wait, and they show up, and my buddy and his dad and his mom, and he said, okay, here's the drill. He said, my mother was famous for hiding dollar bills. And he said, so we need to take off all the light sockets, all the plugs, because she would take them off and stick $100 bills in them. We took almost $30,000 out of that.
Oh, my word. Wow.
She lived there forever. Yeah, man.
I've had an aunt and uncle back, the aunt passed away and the daughter was going through some of the things, and thank goodness, both of the ladies sewed, and the daughter was going through patterns that there was money. There's a stack of patterns.
Yeah.
A friend of mine who passed away a couple years ago was famous for hiding money in books and
Yeah.
Bibles. Rusty told me he found probably a couple $100 just stashed in one book.
I find dollar bills occasionally in books, but no.
No, she hid money.
I haven't found anything in Tom's book department, except notes.
Did share a story about a college kid went off, and he would text home, need money, and they would say, read
Yeah.
John 3:16 or whatever. They had hidden money in his Bible.
Yeah.
And if he
Yeah, they didn't know real quick that he wasn't reading the Bible. Well, that was this guy right here. I mean, it was a common practice back in the ancient world, and I think maybe our parents, our grandparents that were raised during the Depression, they hid money, and I think there's still people that do that. Not sure if it would be worth anything, but it was a common practice. So it was just a simple way to protect things. Maybe it's jewels, maybe coins, whatever, but. That was not a sensible way for him to carry on business and earn profit. And so he did not receive the one talent to protect it. He received it to, next line, wisely. He received it to wisely, use it wisely for his master's profit. And so even though he was given less than the other two servants, he still had the obligation to use what he had to produce maximum profit. And if he had just made double what he had, he would have been wise. He would have satisfied his master. And so the point is that immediately, the good servant probably set up some type of business and they worked with their capital and made it grow. So listen, we're to immediately. We talked about this Monday night after that security deal. One of the guys from Green Acres, he came up and asked me, how do we handle situations when people call and ask for money, or people show up at the door and ask for money? That hasn't happened in a long time, maybe because they know our policy. But we don't, unless it's an emergency, we don't give any money, period. We will go and use a credit card and put some gas in it, okay? But we just tell them that we will pray about it for 48 hours, and then we'll get back to them. And most of the time, that takes care of the issue right there. Because there are people who go from church to church to church to church. And we're called to be good stewards of God's money. And we try to show grace, but the person on the other end doesn't always have that mentality. So, parable to, yes ma'am.
I just want to say, this is the first time I've ever understood this parable.
Good.
I've heard it over and over and over again, and I never understood, because I did understand that burying it in the backyard was a common practice. So to me, I thought, well, it's sort of prudent. I don't understand what's so wrong with that.
Yeah.
And I never understood it until,
Because the master gave him,
because we are called to
yeah, yeah.
increase
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
God's grace
Yeah.
and God. It's the
Grow.
first time I've ever understood it, so thank you.
Yeah, well, hey, I read them for years too, never understood the D star, it's like the Psalms, I mean,
I never understood the bridesmaid thing.
Okay,
I'm like,
yeah,
I don't understand.
yeah.
Being prepared, but
Being
why
prepared,
the bride-
stay alert,
Yeah,
and
right.
stay busy. With God's business, not our busyness, but, you know, there's a lot of people busy with
Yeah, with this one, I just kept thinking, but I just don't understand why, like, you held on to it for it. Like, I don't get why it's so bad.
That would be like us knowing that Jesus and not share.
I understood
Yeah,
now, that's
absolutely,
the first,
yeah.
yes.
That's the way I would
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not providing the increase, that's exactly right, so. Well, thanks everybody for coming, good time, Memorial Day this weekend, and, we're gonna worship.